We're joined today by
J.R. Romano.
Hey everybody, it's J.R. Romano, Chairman of the Connecticut Republican Party. Thank you for tuning in to the second podcast of 2019. We will be doing one a week. Please subscribe or follow. Today's guest, we're going to be talking to Mark Boughton, not only about the 2018 election cycle, but I wanted to get his reaction to Ned Lamont's speech. And speaking of which, let's get right to it. Oh boy, one of the things that I found somewhat humorous, and it's hard to find humor these days, considering how disastrous the Connecticut economy and budget crisis is, but one of the things that Ned Lamont said, and we'll play it for you, but actually here it is.
The people of the great state of Connecticut, and you're my extended family, and we're all in it together.
Yeah, he referred to all of us as his family. Well, last time I checked, I'm not in his family trust, nor do I have the capability to spend $15 million to get myself elected governor. Now, this is the thing that is most hypocritical and annoying about the Democrats. For years, we listened to them wail against the 1% and how evil they were and how out of touch they were. And here you have a guy that's literally standing up in front of this General Assembly with a majority of Democrats who bought $15 million he spent to get himself elected governor. He's the legacy of one of the founders of J.P. Morgan. He went to Harvard, and before he even got there, his family had a library on campus named after them. But no, it's okay when they're a Democrat to be loaded that way. And he makes this joke about how we're all his family. Well, I'll tell you what, until you help my mother pay off her mortgage, we're not in the same family, Ned. So that point aside, one of the things that was almost laughable in this speech is he makes a quote about spending cuts, and I'm going to play it for you right here.
And don't tell me you hear from some consultant there's $1 billion at easy spending cuts.
And this is the thing. He says this after literally giving a $50,000 raise to the DOT commissioner. This is the Democratic Party at its core, completely out of touch, saying one thing to the public to convince them that they should be in charge, and then behind closed doors, they're doing the exact opposite. You want easy cuts, Ned? It's simple. The state of Connecticut has a director of culture. We have a $2 billion budget deficit. The state of Connecticut allows elected officials to pad their pension with mileage so that they can ride off into the sunset with a fatter pension. Cut that. Cut the director of culture. Those are two. I mean, I know these are small things, but lots of small things add up. What's the saying? Death by 1,000 cuts? 1,000 cuts will probably get us there. But that's not what you're doing. He's actually giving people raises. And he's calling for things that are simply going to crush the middle class. The Democrats have lost all touch with reality and actually how to make people's lives better. They can talk about it all they want. All their programs, all their policies, they actually don't yield good results. You know, this minimum wage fight, you know, Ned Lamont here, I'll play the clip of him talking about the minimum wage.
And the 21st century workplace also means moving to a $15 minimum wage.
Here's the reality of minimum wage. And as Republicans, we have to get really, really precise and honest with ourselves in how we wage war against the minimum wage. What we have to do, and I know, just stick with me for a moment. What we have to do is we have to accept the premise that the Democrats are putting before us, that people who are adults with children making minimum wage are suffering. Because they are. I fully believe that. And it is our obligation to help them. But raising the minimum wage doesn't help them. What we should be doing is, and I know that anyone listening to this, I know Republicans agree with me on this, we should be investing in adults who are working minimum wage jobs and giving them job training. You want to go to learn to be a mechanic? The state should pay for it. I'm okay with that because at the end of the day, it's an investment. Because if I get someone who's working minimum wage and is on the cusp or needing government benefits, if I get them to a career of $65, $70, $80, $90,000 a year, in the trades, in something else, that person becomes a taxpayer. And that's what we want. That's what Republicans want. We want more people to be able to live comfortably. See, that's the thing. The Democrats don't actually want that, because if you raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, it doesn't get you a college savings account. It doesn't get you a mortgage. It doesn't get you anything, really. It puts a couple more bucks in your pocket. But it doesn't actually put you in a place where you're comfortable in life. And that's what the goal should be. And as Republicans, that's how we have to frame this argument. I know all of us recognize that if you raise the minimum wage, it actually hurts the economy. We know this, but we have to stop arguing the economic point and start focusing on the people who are impacted by the minimum wage fight. And we have to give them a path to prosperity that's better, that's above and beyond what the Democrats want. Because what the Democrats want is easy. I tell you what, we're not gonna invest in you as a person. We don't think you're worth more than a minimum wage job. That's what the Democrats are actually saying. We don't want you to be more successful than a minimum wage job. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a couple more bucks to give the impression that we care about you. But it's not actually our fight isn't about the minimum wage worker. What it's about, it's the unions, because we get to renegotiate our contracts based off what minimum wage is. So while these families who are living off minimum wages, their lives are not going to improve. Republicans should be talking about how we want to improve the lives of these people, these hard-working people that punch a clock every day. Let's give them a path to a better home, to a college savings account, to a retirement account. You're not going to get there with $15 an hour, and that is one of the core things that is going to be at this fight this legislative session. Because if we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, people in the valley, people who are making $55,000, $65,000, $75,000 a year, your lives are going to get a lot harder, because the coffee you drink is going to get more expensive, the gas is going to get more expensive, every little item that we buy and purchase in our everyday is going to get a little bit more expensive. And that means at the end of the month, we have less money in the bank. And that's what the Democrats don't want to talk about. You know, I always used to make this joke about how Democrats kind of are always making these wisecracks about how Republicans don't believe in science, and it has to do with the argument of climate change. But what I find so fascinating, this is the line, is that Democrats, they want to say that Republicans don't believe in science. The last time I checked, math is a science, and they haven't mastered that yet. So before we move on to climate change, why don't we give the Democrats a lesson in basic math and economics? Because the climate change stuff is much more complicated, and God knows they haven't figured out how the economy works. So that is one of the things that as Republicans, we have to really show how the things we believe in will make people's lives better. Because we don't do that. We often focus on the numbers. So understand, I want to help people. That's why I do this. I want to make the lives in the community that I grew up in, I want to make their lives better. And that's where I think we oftentimes don't do a great job communicating our belief system and our values, because we focus a lot on the numbers. One of the other things that I found fascinating was there's a line that Ned Lamont had, and I'll play it here.
Please don't tell me you've done your share and now it's somebody else's turn. It's all of our turns.
He doesn't care who's to blame. Well, see, I do. Because if you don't want to hold your own party accountable for the failures in Hartford, how are you going to be honest in presenting policies that is going to solve the problem? Because if you're not going to look your party in the eye and say, listen, we can't raise the minimum wage. We can't not renegotiate the CBAC deal. We're going to pretend like the value system and the policies the Democrats want didn't have a negative impact on Connecticut at all. We're going to pretend that didn't happen, and let's just focus on everybody taking responsibility and paying for this. I tell you what, Ned, here's a challenge for you. Governor Lamont, liquidate all of your family fortunes. Give it to the state coffers. Help us pay down the debt. And then see how quickly your perspective changes. Let's see how quickly you realize when you actually are trying to decide between fixing and patching a wall in your home or fixing your car because you know you're going to have to make rent or your mortgage payment or your car payment. And you put things off. See, Ned, you've never had to do that your entire life. So I tell you what, this is what I think you should do. You should give away your family fortune. Give it away. Because that's what Democrats believe, right? That everyone should, the 1% is evil. So Ned, give your money away, put it in the Connecticut, put your entire fortune in the coffers for the state of Connecticut. Help us pay down this debt that your party created by not investing in teachers' retirement plans. Help the state of Connecticut. Do your fair share. Your great-grandparents, according to the Democrat, ethos and thought process, is that they profited off the back of the working class. So I tell you what, give it back, Ned. Give it all back. And let's see how quickly you remain a Democrat when your taxes go up and tolls go in, and all of a sudden you don't understand why you have no money in your bank account and why you're having breakfast for dinner with your kids. That's a reality that you've never had to deal with. This modern Democratic Party has no idea what that's like. They have elected, their election this year was all 1%ers. You had 2 state senators, who spent more than $500,000 of their own money to get elected to the state Senate. You think they know what it's like to grow up with trying to balance keeping the lights on, paying rent? It is mind-blowing to me. It is so frustrating when you listen to them. And this is exactly what's going to happen in the state of Connecticut is the super wealthy are going to leave. Well, they're already starting to, but it's going to be exacerbated by what Ned wants to do. And then the middle class is going to have to be relied on to pay for the wishes and dreams of the Democratic Party, because that's what's going to happen. And then it's just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. Now, I hope Governor Lamont sees the light. But if I'm a betting man, and I don't gamble, but if I'm a betting man, I'm not betting on it. And that is what is the scariest thing about what's happening over the next 4 years, is I think the state is going to continue in its death spiral because Ned Lamont doesn't have the courage to stand up to his own party. I'm going to be bringing on Mayor Mark Boughton next to talk a little bit about this. But it is so frustrating. I'm worried about my friends and family. I'm worried about the people that I grew up with. I'm worried about the people that I see go to work every day. My friends who are electricians and cops and teachers. It's going to get a lot harder. It's going to get a lot harder. Well, I'm gonna take this moment and I want to bring in Mark Boughton. Mayor Mark. Joining me now, I'm very excited to talk to Mayor Mark Boughton. Well, first, Mark, I want to thank you for joining me, and I think I wanted to talk about 2 different things today. I want to talk about one, obviously, is the 2018 cycle and what was that, that process. I know it was hard for all of us. I just wanted to touch on that briefly. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about responding to Ned Lamont's, I guess I'll call it Fantasyland speech. But I think that getting back to this last previous race, I think the thing that most frustrates me about being the party chairman is everyone comes at me with advice and how we need to win the cities. And then I watch as someone like you as a candidate who actually wins in the cities, and how Republicans that are, I'll say, lean hard right or are very conservative, they want us to do better in the cities, but then they fight against someone like you. And it frustrates me as a party chairman because I'm trying to get everybody on the same team. I just kind of wanted to touch base with you a little bit on that and get your thoughts.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that when you look back on the whole process, I'm a big supporter of the Republican Party. I've received the Prescott Bush Award. I'm proud of my Republican roots and heritage, which go back generations here in Danbury. So I think I'm somewhat qualified to say that, we can tinker with the process without undermining the party. So I'm respectful of what you do in State Central and everybody in the loop. But clearly for us, this current setup probably doesn't get us to where we need to be in terms of getting the right candidate. So, there's a lot of proposals out there, things like potentially moving up to conventions, moving up the primary, and I'm actually very supportive of those things. I don't believe in getting rid of the convention, but I think it could be a great place for us to do business, nominate candidates, and then go out to the primary and let things happen. And I think it helps you too from a chairman's perspective, because you'll be able to. Nobody's ever accused you of having your finger on the scale for anybody. You're like, look, it's up to the Republican primary voters, and we have to take a neutral position till this process is complete. But so it can be somewhat frustrating because, as you know, so much work goes into those delegates at the convention. And then the second piece to that is, you're on point. I can't tell you how many town committee meetings I go to, how many state central meetings I've gone to where people pop up and say, well, how do we win in the cities? We don't know how to win the cities. And I'm like, hello, I'm sitting right here. And, and to be fair, Aaron Stewart too, is sitting right next to me, and nobody, certainly you have, but other people out there who consider themselves policymakers or insiders, they've never come to me and said, well, how do you do it here? How can you take a city that's 2.5, 3-1 D to R and win? And they frankly don't care. So I think what happens is we forget that elections are about winning, and you cannot govern if you don't win. It's just that simple. And oftentimes, we shoot ourselves in the foot as a party. We go for the candidate that has a shiny object. And here we are 3 months later trying to figure out what the heck happened.
Well, the line that I always use is that we oftentimes have too many people that allow purity to stand in the way of unity. And the result is that we're divided. There's bad blood. And I think that's the thing that the Democrats never do. If there is bad blood, it never spills out in the press. And it's almost as though and I think I've always joked about this, Mark, and I don't know if you're going to agree with me, but I think it's our greatest strength and our greatest weakness, which is we have this belief in self. We're very individualistic, right? We are, as a party, in our belief, we believe in the individual. And then when that comes to election, though, it gets dicey because that belief in the individual and this sense of integrity and honor and all this stuff that Republicans pride themselves on, I think sometimes gets in the way when we're having our own internal primaries or struggles. And it's hard as party chairman to balance all that. It is not easy. This last cycle with so many candidates, it was not easy. But I appreciate you and I always, you and I had a great relationship through the process. We were always above board. I know there were people concerned about me putting my thumb on the scale, but I was dead set on not doing that. And I think you ran well and represent the Republican well. And it's always great for me to point to a mayor like you. And I've said this before, when I can say, you want to see how to run things well, look at our elected mayors and first selectmen. Look at someone like Mark Boughton or Aaron Stewart or Rich Zekin in Derby, my hometown. But anyway, enough about that. I want to get your opinion on Ned Lamont's speech. I'm really curious, particularly because a lot of what's being discussed in Hartford is going to have an impact on our local communities because of how poorly Hartford's been run and how their policies have been devastating to hard working middle class families like those that reside in Danbury. I'm kind of curious in what your concerns are, and frankly where you think people should be paying attention.
Well, I got to tell you, first of all, I'm not trying to criticize anybody, but I guess I am being a little bit critical. The fact that the governor has taken some of his key financial people out of Hartford is a little scary. The fact that, if I were governor, I'd be looking for people who were successful in those positions, not, those that are teetering on bankruptcy. Although I think as OPM director, she has, a pretty long history within OPM itself. So that in the end may turn out to be a pretty good fit. But look, I just read this morning that, the governor's already talking about slashing municipal aid and, of course, going to the unions, which, he won't get anything. My position always was during the election was that, look, the unions owe us $300 million before we have any discussion. And people are like, well, why do you say that? Well, because that's what they promised us in the lockbox, in the special employee box of employees' suggestions to fix government. They said they were going to have $300 million, and we didn't get one. So before we have any questions, I want my $300 million for the residents of the state of Connecticut. So anyways, good luck with trying to get union concessions. But what I've seen is this dangerous path that the legislature, the Democrats, and the governor, that sounds like he's talking the same way, have gone of trying to balance the state budget on the backs of the municipalities. And basically the message is to a Danbury, to a New Britain, to a Derby, to wherever you can point that's running efficiently and effectively, hey, we screwed up here. Now we're going to come and take your money. Now we're going to make you do more. Now, basically, I'm going to have to turn around and say, well, do I raise property taxes on my residents who will end up paying a greater burden for the mess ups in Hartford? So I'm really nervous today after the things that I've heard. And I think there's going to be a lot of screaming at the end of February when he presents his budget. It's just so unfair that I count every single nickel that comes in and out of this place. And at the end of the day, the state can come in and say, well, we're just going to take it from you anyway. So too bad.
Well, and then when you couple that with the possibility, and I don't know if they're included together, Mark, but you would know better than I, but what's going to happen with the teachers' retirement fund, right? So if they not only cut your municipal aid and then require you to contribute more as a municipality into that fund, it's kind of a double whammy. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I mean, the absurdity of that is that the cities and towns aren't allowed to negotiate the retirement benefit. If you said to me, hey, effective 2022, cities and towns are going to, can go back and specifically negotiate this benefit, and then going forward from there, you're responsible in terms of what kind of level of benefit you give your teachers. Well, I wouldn't like it, but I'd say, okay, at least I have a hand in the negotiations of what that benefit would be and fight for, a 401k style thing or some kind of program like or hybrid plan or something. But basically, what they're doing is pushing off all of the decades of not funding the teachers' retirement fund onto cities and towns and saying, hey, we didn't do our job, so too bad. Looks like you're going to have to pay this. Now, for Danbury, that's about an $8 million hit under the last proposal.
Wow.
We don't have $8 million. Our taxpayers don't have $8 million. It's crazy as it seems, JR. I've actually kicked around the idea, we've looked at it internally here, of giving all the state money back. Just give it back. Look, you guys can have it all. We don't want your mandates. We don't want to have to fund any of your stuff. We'll go out and raise that revenue locally, and we'll see you in court. I mean, it's just getting to that point where we just can't take it anymore.
Well, I was just going to ask you that question. What percentage or how much money, and you may know this off the top of your head, but what does it cost the average Danbury property taxpayer in terms of unfunded mandates from the state of Connecticut? So what that basically means is that the state of Connecticut says Danbury must do X, but gives you no money for it. How much do you think that is in terms of the amount that of time you spend either dealing with the property tax increase or even from a office management standpoint? I mean, how much does unfunded mandates impact a local municipality?
I would say, including the education mandates, minimum 15% of my total budget. So if my total budget,
wow, that much?
Yeah, my total budget is $250 million. You can figure, 10, 25 million, close to $32, $34 million of that are unfunded mandates. So, I'll give you, I can go to forever. I can talk about this, but two of them that stick out in my mind. One is this new thing called MS4, which requires us to go and clean our street catch basins. And they're really pushing it out and saying this is a clean water issue, but it's really not. It's no other state is requiring this kind of level of cleaning and so forth, and reporting, right? We have to measure every amount of rainwater that comes out of our catch basins. We have to provide a measurement to the state to say what's in it. I mean, isn't that the craziest thing? So
no, let me ask you a question though, Mark, and this is where I guess I'm kind of taking a page out of the Democrats' playbook. When you look at Connecticut's refusal to cooperate or deal with the federal government, what would happen if Danbury said, you know what, we're not doing this anymore?
Well, that was, their threat as well. We're going to fine you on a daily basis, or B, we're going to take away your state funding. And so when I look at how little we receive in relation to other major cities in Connecticut, I'm like, you know what? Maybe that's a battle worth fighting in court. So that little mandate I was just telling you about, that's about $700,000 a year additional that we have to find this year.
Because you have to hire an employee to monitor that.
Right, and I got to hire employees, that do above and beyond work that is currently done by our public works department. Our sewer facility has to be renovated. That's a $120 million project we're doing out there. Most of it, about 40 million of it, is on this ridiculous phosphorus requirement. And it gets very technical, but here it is in a nutshell. if you think of a basketball, that's the amount of phosphorus our plant puts out now. They want us to take the basketball and cut it in half. When we're done, that's how much we'll put out because you can't eliminate it entirely. That half basketball costs about $40 million. So it's not going to make any impact on the waterways. It's not going to make any impact on the Housatonic River. And the worst part of it is Massachusetts doesn't have the same mandate. So they're dumping phosphorus all the time into the river. So we're not going to make an impact on it.
And that's coming this way anyway.
And you know what I did? A funny story. I took a bucket when it was pouring out, and I brought it over to our waste treatment plant. And the bucket got filled about halfway with water coming from the sky. And I tested it. And that water had more phosphorus in it than what we're putting out from our waste treatment plant. And I went and sent it to DEP.
Wow.
I mean, it's just
and they
insanity.
don't
It's
budge.
insanity. It's just, but you're talking to a wall. You're talking to the worst bureaucrats of the worst bureaucrats that you can find. And they all point fingers at each other. And they'll say, what's the state federal mandate? The state, it's a nightmare for us. But we're getting through it. We'll get through it.
So was there anything that really stuck out that concerned you from the speech that Ned Lamont gave?
Look, anytime you get sworn in, it's a good day. And I think all of us, Republicans and Democrats alike, should wish success upon Governor Lamont. If he's successful, Connecticut is successful, and our cities and towns will be successful. But we know what's underneath, and we know the challenges. And we know that, as much as Bob Stefanowski got criticized for not putting a plan out, Ned Lamont never put a plan out either. Somehow he got away with nobody ever asking, well, where's your budget? Where's your 600-page budget plan? And where is your, plan for DEEP or whatever? And now we'll see the devil becomes the details. And I think as you see through the next 3 months, when you get things like tolls on the roads and you get an income tax hike and you get all this other stuff that's going to happen, people are really going to be very, very unhappy. And, you didn't hear about that on Wednesday because it's just a happy day.
Yeah, it's funny. The idea of like it's a day of optimism when we hope what's best for the state of Connecticut. I think my fear is that I don't think this honeymoon's going to last long, and frankly, I don't think the one that's going to crush Ned Lamont's dreams is going to be the Republicans. It's going to be his own party. I think dealing with the number of progressives that are pushing for bigger government, pushing for more mandates, making life harder for, say, a mayor like you. It's not going to be. There's no question in my mind that I think at the end of this, Ned Lamont may have more friends on the Republican side of the aisle than he does on the Democrats because they want to push this state hard left.
I agree with you. He's going to have to put up his hands and say stop. If he does this job right, he may be the final block between them and complete insanity in the state, and that really is very interesting. But I think you're right.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting. And again, Mark, I really appreciate everything you do for the party. I appreciate you coming on. Fingers crossed for for the people of Danbury and the people where I grew up, born and raised in Derby, Connecticut, that this current path that the state of Connecticut's on doesn't continue. But based on some of the things that were said, I'm not even cautiously optimistic.
No, I agree with you. I think, in terms of what we need to do in the party, people like you, people like me, is you can't, get completely devastated. And look, nobody can complain more loudly than I can about the results. We do, though, have got to get serious about doing what you started at the top of this discussion, about putting aside our differences and celebrating the things that unite us in the party, to say that, you can agree with somebody 80% of the time and disagree with them 20% of the time, but that's my gal or that's my guy, and I'm going to vote for them because this emphasis on purity, and if you're somebody like me who's made tens of thousands of decisions in office, becomes almost absurd. And, I get scrutinized more than they scrutinize a Democrat.
It is ridiculous. Well, what's funny is that, and it puts me in an interesting situation, Mark. You're going to laugh. So I will fight and defend Joe Markley as hard as I fight and defend Aaron Stewart, and that's what we need more of.
Yeah.
And I was on the New Haven Independent podcast, whatever they do, yelling at Nick Boletto, who was taking shots at Joe Markley, and I'll sit down with some very conservative members of the party, and I'll be like, you guys want to do more successful in cities, you should be talking to Aaron Stewart, and it's not an easy road go down. But I agree with you. I think we're going to have to continue to go down that path. But I'll let you have the final word, Mark. What do you want everyone to know?
Here's what I want everybody to know. Aside from all the great things that are happening in Danbury, if you're thinking about getting involved in the Republican Party, this is the time to do it. Elections are already, happening in the local races across the state of Connecticut. And believe it or not, in 2020, we're going to have state elections again. So we lost a few seats and we got beat here and there. Now's the time to start laying the groundwork for us to take back those seats and for those individuals to win it. So I'm committed to that. I know JR is. I know that the entire Republican team is. And at the end of the day, we're going to win elections again. So don't despair. Pick your head up and let's get to work.
I really appreciate that, Mark. Thank you so much, and keep being that shining example I can point to when I say this is what Republican leadership looks like in government.
You got it. Take care, JR.
Thank you so much.